closed his eyes, just for a nap beneath the cedar tree. But what he saw was not a dream. A royal procession in golden silk, a queen who had been watching him all along, a lost island in need of hope, and a simple farmer asked to rule it. 15 years of paradise, a harvest that fed a kingdom. And then, one final message from the queen: it's time to come home. But when he opened his eyes, he was back under the tree. Only 10 minutes had passed. What if the life that changed you the most only lasted a single dream? And what if it was real all along? That afternoon, the sky was steeped in the color of steeped tea, muted, solemn, and deep. The scent of earth rose richly the moment the first drops of rain began to fall, tapping gently on the cabbage rows and freshly planted rice paddies. Beneath the wide, ancient branches of a cedar tree, a group of farmers rushed to find shelter. Their laughter floated in the air like steam rising from warm bread, soft and unhurried. Among them was Nathan, a quiet man, kind-eyed and steady. He wiped his brow with a worn cloth and leaned his back against the tree like it was an old friend. In his hands was a simple lunch: warm rice, pickled radish, and a small bottle of barley tea. The rain danced on the leaves above, a rhythm like a lullaby only the land could sing. Suddenly, something light landed on his knee, a butterfly, golden as morning, still as prayer. Nathan instinctively raised a hand to brush it away, but an elder nearby spoke up before he could. "Don't," said old Jacob, a farmer with a voice like autumn wind. "The butterfly is sacred. In the old stories, our souls travel as butterflies when we sleep, and from those journeys, dreams are born." Nathan half smiled, not sure what to believe. But something about the way Jacob spoke made him pause. He lowered his hand. The butterfly lingered for a moment longer, then fluttered away into the soft air. The rain, the murmurs of conversation, the smell of steamed rice. It all wrapped around Nathan like a woven blanket. He closed his eyes and let his head rest against the tree. When he opened them again, he was still beneath the cedar. But something was different. The chatter had stopped. The laughter was gone. The air had shifted. He sat up slowly, blinking. No one else was there. Just him and the sound of raindrops slipping from leaf to leaf. His friends had likely returned to work, he thought. But he saw no one in the nearby fields. And the fog, it was growing thicker now. Soft white mist curled around his ankles and stretched across the ground, hiding the horizon. From the deepest part of the mist, he saw figures begin to appear, human shapes. But these were not the farmers. As they approached, it became clear. Their robes shimmered with crimson and gold silk. Their hair was pinned with silver ornaments. Their sandals were carved with patterns Nathan had never seen. These were not ordinary people. This was a royal procession. Nathan jumped to his feet and bowed low, heart pounding in confusion and awe. The one who led them, an elder with kind eyes that sparkled like moonlight on water, stepped forward. "You are Nathan, the farmer from Greenfield." I am. "The Queen has sent us," the elder said. "She has dreamt of you, and she seeks your help." Nathan looked around, bewildered. "Surely you have the wrong man. I am just a man who grows rice." "Exactly," the elder replied. "The hands that know how to grow from the earth are the ones that know how to save it." Before Nathan could question further, they handed him a robe, woven from pale blue and silver silk, light as a sigh. As he dressed, He noticed how perfectly it fit, as if it had been made just for him. And with that, they turned and began to walk. Nathan hesitated only once, casting one last glance toward the misted fields behind him. Then he followed them, step by step, into the fog that seemed now less like mist and more like a curtain lifting on a stage. He didn't understand where he was going or why, but something in his heart, something deeper than thought, told him this was not just a dream. It was a calling. The mist had thickened like a veil drawn slowly across a memory. Nathan sat alone beneath the cedar. The once familiar sounds of his friends now vanished into the damp hush of fog. The rain had become a rhythm in the leaves, a soft percussion in the air. He stood slowly, brushing the moss from his pants, peering into the pale curtain of white that had settled over the countryside. And then, he saw them. Figures, dozens of them, emerging from the deepest part of the mist. They moved slowly, with grace, as though the earth itself had invited them to rise from silence. Their robes shimmered, gold threaded with crimson, whispering against the damp earth like silk brushing stone. Their hair was dark and shining, arranged in elegant coils and braids Nathan had only seen in books, or perhaps in dreams he had long forgotten. It didn't take long for him to realize this was no ordinary group. These were not farmers, not villagers. They were something else entirely, royalty. At their center was an elder with a presence so commanding that Nathan instinctively bowed low, heart thudding. But the elder only chuckled gently and beckoned him to rise. "You've been summoned," the man said, his voice calm and clear, though he barely raised it above a whisper. "The Queen of the River Realm has requested your presence. You are needed." Nathan blinked. "Me? There must be a mistake. I'm just a farmer." The elder smiled again, warm and knowing. "And yet she has called for you, Nathan of the Fields." Still uncertain, Nathan stood straight, his heart warring between awe and disbelief. He looked around the group. Each figure nodded at him, not as though he were out of place, but as though they had expected him all along. Before he could speak again, 2 attendants stepped forward and handed him a bundle of cloth. "Your robes," one of them said. Nathan took the fabric with trembling hands. It shimmered in the gray light, silver and deep blue, soft as mist and light as breath. He stepped behind a curtain held between 2 staff bearers and changed. The garments fit him perfectly, as though they had been tailored to his every angle and movement. He looked down at himself, then back toward the elder. "If this is a dream," he murmured to no one, "then let it be a kind one." The elder extended his arm, and Nathan stepped forward, joining the procession. They walked in silence, the path soft beneath their feet, winding past trees and through fields that no longer felt familiar. Nathan tried to trace their route back to the cedar tree, but it had disappeared in the fog. Everything now was shadow and light, scent and stillness. The procession glided through the world as if untouched by it, like moonlight on water. He began to notice the scents, not of rain or earth, but spices, cinnamon, clove, cardamom, woven together with the floral sweetness of jasmine, cherry blossom, and something citrusy and bright. The air smelled like celebration, like old stories and new beginnings. Eventually, they reached a wide stone gate carved with symbols Nathan couldn't read, but felt like they had always been waiting for him. The guards stepped aside, and the gates opened without a sound. Inside stood a palace unlike anything Nathan had ever imagined. Its walls were draped with silken tapestries, tales stitched in color, glowing under the light of delicate hanging lanterns. The floor was a patchwork of bamboo mats, velvet rugs, and soft fur hides, and overhead, the ceiling was painted with stars, not dots or points, but stars that seemed to pulse gently, almost as though they were breathing. Nathan found his eyes drawn toward the throne at the far end of the hall, and there she sat, the queen. She was not what he had expected, not austere or cold, but radiant. Her robes were cream and gold, embroidered with ripe lychee fruit that shimmered like jewels. Her hair was silver, flowing like a river at twilight, but it was her eyes that held him. They were deep and dark and full of things he couldn't name, memories, perhaps, or prophecies not yet spoken. She raised a hand, and the room quieted completely. "Nathan," she said, her voice no louder than wind through grass, "we have watched you from afar. You tend your land with care. You honor the earth. You see beauty even in labor. This kingdom needs such a heart." He stepped forward, feeling both humble and afraid. "What would you have of me?" The queen smiled, and it was like the sky opening. "There is an island," she said, "rich in soil, weary in spirit. It needs a governor, someone to remind its people how to grow, how to give, how to believe again. Will you go?" The words caught in his chest. He thought of his fields, of his ordinary life, his quiet joy, but also of the pull in his chest now, the sense of something calling. "I will," he said. And so, the queen nodded, and a new story began. The palace shimmered in the soft fog like a dream too beautiful to touch. Silk banners flowed down its white stone walls, embroidered with phoenixes and flowing rivers. Thomas, still stunned by the procession, stood at its threshold, his new robes rustling like wind through feathers, warm despite the rain. He was led inside by the elder from the procession, who walked with quiet purpose. The great doors opened, revealing a chamber lit by amber lanterns and ceiling windows that caught the last rays of sun. The floor was covered in soft furs and bamboo mats, and the air smelled of cinnamon, jasmine, and citrus. At the center of the chamber stood the queen. She wore robes the color of moonlight, embroidered with crimson thread in the shapes of lychee fruit. Her presence was radiant, not loud or commanding, but still, Thomas couldn't look away. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was no louder than a whisper, but it filled the room completely. "Thomas," she said, "we've watched your care for the earth, your patience, your humility. We have need of such gifts." Thomas stood silent. "There is a land, an island, across the great river," she continued. "It was once a place of life, but it has grown tired. Its people need guidance, not from a conqueror, but from someone who understands how to listen." Her eyes found his. "Will you help?" Thomas's voice was quiet but steady. "I will." The queen smiled. She gestured to the attendants who stood nearby, each holding items wrapped in soft cloth. They approached and bowed, offering him garments of navy and silver, a traditional guest's robe. The elder explained, "They were sewn for your measure before we even knew your name, and they fit like they had been waiting." Thomas spent the next few days at the palace, not as a prisoner, nor as royalty, but as a guest. He was taught the customs of the court, the ways of the island, and the language of the queen's people. But never once was he asked to be someone else. "Lead as yourself," she told him. "That is why we called you." Then, one morning wrapped in gold, he boarded a boat unlike any he had ever seen. The ship's wood was carved with waves and stars, and its sails bloomed like clouds. As they pushed off the shore, the queen placed a hand to her heart and whispered, "Blessings." Thomas stood at the front of the ship, watching the world expand. The water sparkled with threads of light. The air smelled like the promise of something just beyond knowing. He thought of the cedar tree, the bark at his back, the butterfly on his knee. Was this still a dream? It didn't matter. He was here. Hours passed in a rhythm of wind and silence. When the island finally came into view, it rose from the river like an emerald sleeping in moonlight. Tall trees leaned gently toward the shore. Wildflowers dotted the hills like stars. The soil beneath the dock squished gently beneath his feet. It felt alive. The governor's house sat nestled beneath the branches of elder trees. It wasn't grand, not like the palace, but it breathed. Its wood was warm, its doors open to the breeze. There were rooms for sleep, rooms for stories, and rooms for stillness. It felt enough. Inside, Thomas found a desk, a garden, and a place to kneel. The kitchen smelled of herbs and earth. Outside, villagers waited. They had heard of his coming. He stepped toward them, not with authority, but with listening. He asked their names, he asked their stories, he asked what the land remembered. They taught him, and he, in turn, listened deeply. In the first season, he helped dig wells. In the second, he helped plant seeds. By the third, he was no longer the visitor, he was simply Thomas. When the rains came, the harvest doubled. When the sun returned, it tripled. But more than the rice or fruit, it was the peace that grew. Thomas taught them not just how to till the soil, but how to trust the rhythm beneath it. He built places for celebration, places for silence, places for the young to wonder and the old to rest. And each night, before sleep, he knelt in the garden and whispered, "Thank you." He didn't know who he was thanking, but it felt right to say it. He never forgot the queen's eyes, or the way her words had held him, not with pressure, but with invitation. He didn't know how long he'd stay, or how real it all was. But when he placed his hands in the dirt, he felt something true, something lasting. And in that truth, he found the first seed of peace. Jonah stood at the edge of the fog, unsure if he was dreaming or simply caught in some other version of reality. The procession before him was dazzling, unlike anything he'd seen in his quiet farming life. The silken robes shimmered like morning dew. Their faces, though unfamiliar, were kind. And when the elder among them stepped forward, Jonah instinctively bowed low, not from fear, but awe. "Please rise," the elder said, his voice warm as sunlight through a curtain. "There's no need for formality. We have come in peace, by the queen's own request." Jonah hesitated. "The queen sent for me? She has seen your heart," the man replied, "and believes it belongs to something greater than the fields alone." Jonah's brows furrowed. "But I'm just a farmer." The elder chuckled softly, like wind moving through tall grass. "And yet, you cultivate more than crops. You tend to the earth as one tends to a wounded soul, with patience, reverence, and quiet strength. That is why she sent for you." Still uncertain, Jonah watched as the others opened a finely woven bundle. Inside was a garment of deep blue and silver, robes threaded with tiny constellations. The cloth looked impossibly soft, and it shimmered like moonlight on water. "These are yours now," said the elder. "Gifts for a guest of the queen." Jonah's hands trembled as he touched the fabric. "Surely, you've made a mistake." But the robe fit as if it had always been his. The procession offered him a moment to change in privacy. When Jonah stepped from behind the tree, dressed in the ceremonial garments, the air seemed to hush around him. The fog welcomed him like an old friend, and the strange, beautiful figures nodded with approval. And just like that, the journey began. They walked in silence at first, not the awkward kind, but the sacred kind, the kind that makes space for wonder. Around them, the mist curled like silk, parting just enough to reveal glimpses of glowing lanterns, distant towers, and a path made not of dirt, but of pressed petals and woven reeds. Jonah's sandals made no sound. The robe fluttered gently behind him, and he couldn't help but marvel at the feeling, as if the clothes carried him. There was no weight on his shoulders, only warmth. They crossed through a narrow arch of weeping willows. On the other side, a grand palace emerged from the fog, its gates carved from ivory wood, its windows alight with golden flame. It pulsed with life, yet felt peaceful, like a cathedral of the earth. 2 guards opened the gate without a word. The courtyard within was vast, lined with still fountains and smooth river stones. Every breath Jonah took was full of scent: jasmine, orange blossom, cedar smoke, and something deeper, something sacred. They led him through winding halls, past murals that seemed to move when you stared too long. Finally, they arrived at a chamber with ceilings so high they disappeared into stars. And there, seated on a low dais, was the queen. She wore robes the color of snow beneath a winter moon, stitched with golden lychee fruits. She did not shine like the sun. She glowed like something much older and quieter. Her gaze was steady, not cold, but clear, as if she already knew everything Jonah had ever thought and yet loved him still. "Jonah of the fields," she said, and though her voice was soft, it filled the entire chamber. "You have been chosen, not by chance, but by care." He bowed again, deeper this time. "You see, there is a land within my realm," she continued, "a fertile island that has long been asleep. Its people are kind, its soil rich, but time has worn their hope thin. They do not need a ruler, they need a gardener, a soul who remembers that growth is never forced, only invited." She paused, eyes never leaving his. "Would you go? Not as a king, but as a steward, not for glory, but to serve." Jonah looked down at his hands, calloused, weathered, honest. "I would be honored," he said quietly. The queen smiled. It was not triumphant, but grateful. "Then let the journey begin at dawn." As Jonah was escorted to a chamber to rest, he passed beneath a banner that read, "Nothing." No titles, no fanfare, only a pattern of growing vines stitched in silver. And in the silence of that hallway, Jonah realized he had not been chosen to change the land. He had been chosen because he already knew how to listen to it. The sails billowed like clouds, catching the river's breath as the wooden ship cut gently across the water. Elijah stood at the bow, arms resting on the polished rail, his eyes half closed. The breeze carried a warmth that kissed his cheeks, and every now and then, a bird would glide past, as if guiding him forward. Somewhere behind him, the queen's advisors murmured softly, pointing out distant hills and trees as they drew near to their destination. The journey had felt dreamlike, not just in pace, but in presence. Elijah had spent much of it wondering if he'd awaken beneath that same cedar tree, his lunch still warm, and the butterfly still resting on his knee. But as the land came into view, something shifted inside him. This wasn't a dream meant to pass. It was something more. The island appeared like a jewel in the river's palm. Lush, green, and impossibly vibrant, it seemed to hum with life. The boat drifted into a quiet cove where flowering trees leaned over the shore, casting speckled shadows on the ground. As Elijah stepped off the boat, his sandals pressed into soft, springy earth. 1,000 blades of grass greeted him. He knelt, touched the soil, and knew the queen had not lied. "This land is alive," he murmured. The advisors led him toward a modest estate nestled in the curve of 2 hills. Along the way, they passed fields of swaying rice, wild plum trees, and rows of herbs dancing in the breeze. Bees hovered lazily, and songbirds sang from the canopy. Elijah couldn't help but feel the quiet embrace of welcome in every step. "I apologize," one advisor said as they reached the estate's entrance. "It may feel humble compared to Her Majesty's palace." But Elijah, still awestruck, shook his head. "I've never seen anything more beautiful." The estate, while smaller than the queen's domain, was everything he could have hoped for. Inside were soft woven rugs, carved wood furniture, and a bed that felt like resting inside a cloud. Windows framed the river and sky, and each breeze carried the scent of lavender and earth. In the following days, Elijah met the people. They were kind, weathered by hardship, but rich in heart. Children ran barefoot through orchards. Elders gathered under banyan trees, sharing stories that danced with wisdom. And they welcomed him not as a stranger, but as one of their own. Elijah didn't pretend to know it all. He asked questions, listened deeply, and walked every part of the island, barefoot whenever possible. Slowly, plans took root. Abandoned fields were revived, water channels were cleared, seeds were planted, and hope returned. The first harvest came like a celebration of joy. Wheat bowed in golden thanks, pears hung heavy from boughs, rice rippled like silk in the wind. To honor it, Elijah hosted a feast, not as a governor, but as a neighbor. Lanterns were strung through the trees, long tables filled with fruit and bread, and laughter echoed through the hills. Time passed, not in hours, but in seasons. 1 year became 5, then 10. Elijah no longer thought of his old life with longing, but with gentle remembrance. He'd found something here, something steady, something sacred. The fields grew richer, the orchards thrived. Villagers danced barefoot in the rain, and children sang lullabies Elijah had taught them. He built libraries from forgotten crates, planted gardens with secret walking paths, and made space for joy in every corner. Though he governed, he also tilled. Though he led, he listened, and the island bloomed. One afternoon, as he repaired a garden fence, a boat approached the dock. From it stepped one of the queen's attendants, robed in red and silver. "Elijah of the River Isle," the attendant said with reverence. "Her Majesty calls you home." Elijah's heart trembled, not with fear, but with love. This island, this people, they had become a second skin. That night, the villagers gathered beneath a starlit sky. They brought music, food, and stories. They danced until the fire burned low, and one by one came to thank the man who had given them not just food, but belief. Elijah stood at the edge of the gathering, looking out across the dark river. The stars blinked above like the eyes of old gods, and as the wind passed over the grass, it seemed to say, "You are part of this place now." When he lay down to sleep that night, The windows above his bed framed constellations. He watched as each light flickered to life, remembering his first night on the island. Uncertain, trembling, hopeful. He didn't feel uncertain anymore, just full. And when his eyes finally closed, it wasn't with sadness. It was with peace. The next morning arrived, not with fanfare, but with a silence so soft it felt like silk drawn across skin. Elijah stood at the dock where the Queen's ship waited, its creamy sails fluttering like a sigh. Around him, villagers gathered with quiet eyes. No one spoke of goodbyes. Instead, they offered what they had: jars of honey, bundles of dried herbs, carved tokens made of driftwood. Each gift was handed to him with both hands, as if placing a blessing. He accepted each one with the same reverence, not as offerings, but as memories, tangible echoes of 15 golden years. "I don't know what to say," he finally whispered. An old woman stepped forward and pressed a folded handkerchief into his palm. "Then don't say anything," she replied. "Just carry us with you." He nodded, unable to speak further. The lump in his throat was too real. The Queen's attendant gestured gently toward the boat. Elijah stepped aboard, feeling the wood creak beneath his feet like an old friend sighing. As the boat pulled away from the shore, a breeze caught the edge of his robe. The sails filled. The island began to retreat behind them. Elijah watched until the last tree disappeared into mist, and then the fog came. At first it curled gently across the water like a shawl, soft, warm, strangely familiar. Then it thickened, not with cold, but with comfort. It blanketed the world in a hush, wrapping the ship in a silence that pulsed like a heartbeat. He couldn't see the shore anymore, couldn't see the sky, couldn't even see the attendant standing only feet away. And so he did what he had done so many times in life. He closed his eyes and breathed. He thought of the orchard in bloom, the laughter of children running between trees. He thought of his first harvest, the taste of rice cooked in clay pots over fire. He thought of dancing under lanterns, of stargazing through bedroom windows, of the day he planted a tree with his bare hands and whispered to it, "Grow with us." He smiled. The fog, though dense, was not frightening. It was like returning to a dream. And as he exhaled, something shifted. The weight beneath him disappeared. He was no longer on the boat, no longer in the fog. Instead, he felt the familiar scratch of bark against his back, the scent of damp cedar thick in the air. His hands were pressed to soft soil. A breeze moved across his cheek. He opened his eyes. The forest surrounded him. The great cedar tree stood tall, its limbs stretching into the sky like arms in prayer. Around him, his friends laughed, voices echoing across the damp afternoon. Someone was passing him a canteen. Another waved half a rice ball in his direction. He blinked. It hadn't been years. It had been minutes. "Welcome back," one of the men chuckled, clapping him on the shoulder. "You fell asleep faster than the rain did." Elijah sat up slowly. His hands trembled. His heart was racing, but not from fear, from awe. He turned to the older farmer sitting beside him. "How long was I asleep?" "10 minutes, give or take," the man replied. "You looked peaceful." Elijah stared at the bark of the tree, then at the patch of earth beneath its roots. His breath caught. Something shimmered. A patch of moss, bright green, encircled by a shallow rivulet of rainwater. In its center, a tiny boat made of twigs and bark bobbing in the stream. Just beside it, ants moved in procession, carrying something delicate, a yellow butterfly. It had just emerged from the tree's base, and a moment later it fluttered upward, circling once above Elijah's head before vanishing into the trees. He exhaled. No one laughed at his silence. They knew. Something had passed. Something sacred. "I think I had a dream," he said. He told them everything. The royal procession, the queen, the island, the years that passed in heartbeats, the people, the harvest, the laughter, the return. No one interrupted. When he finished, there was a hush. Finally, the old man smiled. "I saw the butterfly leave your chest when you fell asleep. It flew right into the tree." Elijah swallowed hard. It was real, wasn't it? The old farmer placed a hand over his heart. "Does it matter?" Elijah looked back at the tiny stream, the little boat, the green island of moss. "No," he whispered. "No, I don't think it does." He rose to his feet. The others followed. The rain had stopped, and the soil was soft beneath their sandals. The air smelled of pine and promise. Elijah turned to the tree once more, and without a word, placed the second half of his lunch beside the roots, near the colony entrance. A final gift, a thank you. And as the farmers walked back to their fields, Elijah felt something deeper than memory. He felt something eternal, not just a dream, but a calling answered. The sun cast dappled patterns through the cedar branches as Elijah returned to his daily routines. The familiar rhythm of tending to his fields, sharing meals with friends, and watching the seasons change brought a comforting sense of normalcy. Yet, beneath this surface, a quiet transformation stirred within him. Each morning, as he stepped onto the dew-kissed grass, Elijah felt a newfound connection to the earth beneath his feet. The soil seemed richer, the air more fragrant, and the songs of the birds more melodious. It was as if the dream had awakened a deeper appreciation for the simple wonders of life. In the evenings, Elijah often found himself gazing at the stars, recalling the constellations he had admired through the windows of his island home. The memories of the Queen's palace, the vibrant community, and the lush landscapes lingered in his mind, not as a distant fantasy, but as a vivid experience that had left an indelible mark on his soul. He began to notice subtle changes in his interactions with others. His words carried a gentle wisdom, his actions a quiet confidence. Neighbors sought his counsel more frequently, drawn to the calm presence he exuded. Elijah shared stories of the dream, not to boast, but to inspire and connect. One day, while walking through the village, Elijah encountered a young boy struggling to carry a heavy bundle of firewood. Without hesitation, he stepped in to help, lifting the load with ease. The boy looked up at him with wide eyes, gratitude shining in his expression. "Thank you, sir," the boy said softly. Elijah smiled, placing a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. "Always lend a hand when you can," he replied. As they walked together, Elijah shared tales of the island, describing the cooperative spirit of its inhabitants and the joy found in communal efforts. The boy listened intently, his imagination ignited by the vivid descriptions. Inspired by Elijah's stories, the villagers began to embrace a renewed sense of community. They organized gatherings to share meals, exchange ideas, and support one another. The village flourished, not through grand gestures, but through the collective efforts of its people, each contributing their unique gifts. Elijah's dream had become a catalyst for transformation, bridging the realms of imagination and reality. The lessons he had learned in the dream world, compassion, cooperation, and the beauty of simplicity, had taken root in his waking life, blossoming into a legacy that would endure for generations. As the seasons turned, Elijah continued to nurture both his crops and his community, guided by the wisdom of his dream. He understood that the boundaries between dreams and reality are often porous, and that the truths we uncover in our slumber can illuminate our waking paths. And so, beneath the shade of the ancient cedar tree, Elijah found peace, not in the grandeur of distant palaces, but in the quiet, enduring beauty of a life well lived, rooted in love, connection, and the gentle whispers of dreams. The days after Elijah's awakening unfolded like pages in a cherished book, each moment imbued with a newfound depth. The village, once a backdrop to his daily routines, now shimmered with significance. Every rustling leaf, every murmured greeting, every shared meal carried echoes of his dream. Elijah found himself drawn to the cedar tree more often, its towering presence a comforting reminder of his journey. He would sit beneath its branches, eyes closed, letting the memories wash over him. The queen's serene gaze, the laughter of island children, the scent of ripe lychees in the air. One afternoon, as golden sunlight filtered through the leaves, Elijah noticed a group of children playing nearby. Their laughter rang out, pure and unburdened. He approached them, a gentle smile on his face. "Would you like to hear a story?" he asked. The children gathered around eagerly, their eyes wide with anticipation. Elijah began to weave tales of a distant island, of a humble farmer who became a governor, of feasts under starlit skies, and of a butterfly that guided souls through dreams. As he spoke, the children's imaginations took flight. They envisioned themselves as explorers, as leaders, as dreamers. The stories ignited a spark within them, a belief in the magic that resides in everyday moments. Vocabulary word of Elijah's tales spread through the village. Soon, adults joined the children beneath the cedar tree, eager to listen and share. The community began to gather regularly, each person contributing their own stories, songs, and memories. The village square transformed into a tapestry of shared experiences, woven together by the threads of collective memory. Inspired by the unity and warmth of these gatherings, Elijah proposed a new tradition, a seasonal festival celebrating dreams and stories. The villagers embraced the idea with enthusiasm. They decorated the square with lanterns, prepared dishes inspired by Elijah's tales, and composed songs that echoed the rhythms of the island. On the night of the first festival, the village glowed with light and laughter. Elijah stood at the center, surrounded by friends and neighbors, his heart full. He realized that while his dream had taken him to distant lands, its true purpose had been to illuminate the beauty and potential within his own community. As the festival continued into the night, Elijah looked up at the stars, their brilliance mirrored in the eyes of those around him. He understood that dreams are not just visions of distant realms, but seeds planted in the fertile soil of our daily lives. With care and nurturing, they blossom into realities that enrich our world. And so, beneath the canopy of stars and the watchful branches of the cedar tree, Elijah found peace, not in the grandeur of far-off kingdoms, but in the simple, profound connections forged through shared stories and dreams. The following morning, Elijah rose with the first light. Mist still clung to the fields, soft and silver, and the dew made every leaf sparkle like it had been kissed by stars. His steps were slow, thoughtful. He walked alone, following the familiar path through the edge of the field and into the grove where the old cedar tree waited, tall and still. This was the place it all began, the place where a nap turned into a lifetime. The tree looked unchanged, as though no time had passed, but Elijah had changed, and something in the air around him had too. He could feel it, a kind of stillness that wasn't empty, but full. A quietness so alive it made the breath in his chest feel sacred. He reached the base of the cedar and knelt, fingertips brushing the soil. The rain from the day before had left the ground soft and fragrant. With care, he pulled back a small patch of moss near the roots, the same place where, not long ago, a yellow butterfly had flown into a hidden world of ants and dreams. The earth yielded gently, revealing a small hollow. Inside, he saw them, tiny glints of movement, ants, dozens of them. They moved in purposeful lines, carrying crumbs, leaves, and bits of bark as they worked in complete harmony. But it wasn't the ants that stopped Elijah's breath. It was what they had built. There, in the center of the hollow, nestled inside a ring of bright moss, stood a miniature version of the palace from his dream, made of twigs and dried petals, its gates fashioned from blades of grass, its roof dotted with tiny red berries. Beside it was a perfect circle of bark, floating gently on a stream of morning water that wrapped around the moss like a river. A small boat, just like the one from the dream. Elijah blinked, once, twice, but it didn't go away. If anything, the scene before him seemed to shimmer even more clearly, bathed in sunlight and wonder. He smiled, not the smile of someone surprised, but of someone who understood. It was real, he whispered. It didn't matter now whether it had been a dream or a journey of the soul. What mattered was how it had lived in him, changed him, how it had seeded joy in his heart and bloomed into something that touched his village, his neighbors, his family, his very way of being. Beside him, a butterfly landed quietly on the bark, yellow, software familiar. He watched it for a long time, his hand hovering over his chest, right where the butterfly had rested when he'd first fallen asleep that day long ago. Something about the moment made his throat tighten. This, he knew, was his goodbye. He reached into the fold of his shirt and pulled out a small cloth bundle he'd stitched the night before. Inside were crumbs of rice, a slice of plum, and a single candy, wrapped in wax paper, its blue color faded with time. He placed the bundle at the edge of the ant colony, a gift, not just to the ants, not just to the dream, but to everything and everyone who had carried him through it. "Thank you," he said softly, "for letting me remember who I am." He gently covered the hollow again, patting the earth until it looked untouched. Then he stood, brushing the soil from his hands, and turned to face the day. The village behind him was waking. Birds called in the distance. A dog barked somewhere near the road, and the scent of bread, fresh and warm, drifted on the breeze. Elijah took a deep breath, then began walking home. With each step, he felt lighter, not because he'd left something behind, but because he was finally carrying something forward, a truth, a story, a piece he no longer needed to question. And though the days would pass, and the fields would change, and the seasons would turn like they always had, the dream would live on, not just in his memory, but in his choices, in the way he listened, in the way he loved. Later that evening, as dusk painted the sky in strokes of lavender and gold, Elijah sat on his porch with his daughter and her little boy. The boy, no older than 6, tugged on his grandfather's sleeve and asked for a bedtime story. Elijah looked out toward the horizon. The wind shifted, carrying the soft scent of cedar. He smiled. "I've got one," he said, drawing the child close. "But it's not just any story. It's a very special one, about a butterfly and a tree and a place only the heart can reach." As he began to speak, the stars slowly blinked into the sky, and with each word, the dream lived again. Not in sleep this time, but in story. And this time, it belonged to them all. The fire crackled gently in the hearth. Outside, the evening rain tapped softly against the windows, like a lullaby only the sky could sing. Elijah sat in his favorite chair, the little boy, now fast asleep beside him, curled under a patchwork quilt, cheeks still round with dreams. His daughter, Mira, sat nearby with a cup of chamomile tea in hand. She hadn't heard the whole story before, not in this way. And now, with the last of it told, she simply looked at her father, eyes glistening in the quiet. "Did it really happen?" she whispered. Elijah didn't answer at first. He leaned back, watching the firelight flicker on the walls. Then he looked down at the boy's sleeping face, soft with wonder, and smiled. "It doesn't matter if it did," he said. "What matters is that it still speaks." Mira nodded. "Because it was beautiful?" "Because it was true," he replied. "Not the kind of truth you can measure or prove, but the kind that stays, the kind that changes you." She sipped her tea, then set it down and leaned her head on his shoulder. "I think I understand." Elijah placed a hand gently over hers. "One day, you'll tell him this story too. And maybe he'll tell his children, and maybe none of them will know exactly where it came from. But that won't matter. Why not? Because the dream wasn't mine," he said. "It belonged to the part of us that still listens, still hopes, still believes in wonder." They sat like that for a long time, just breathing, just being. The fire burned low, the rain softened, and the silence between them grew warm and golden, not empty, but full. Later that night, after the lamps were dimmed and the dishes washed, Elijah stepped outside alone. The rain had stopped and the sky was clear. Stars spread across the heavens like a field of scattered prayers. He walked down the path that led behind the house, boots brushing the dew from the grass, until he reached the edge of the old grove. The cedar tree stood tall in the moonlight, and though many years had passed since that day of the butterfly and the storm, it still felt alive with memory, like the tree itself remembered. Elijah placed his hand against the bark, cool and rough beneath his fingers. He closed his eyes, and in the hush of the evening, he heard it. A whisper, not in words, but in feeling. Not a message to decipher, but a knowing that everything they'd experienced, the journey, the kingdom, the island, the laughter, the farewell, had been more than just a dream. It had been a revealing, a glimpse of what's possible when a soul is quiet enough to listen. When he opened his eyes, the moonlight shimmered through the branches, and just there, resting on a leaf near the base of the tree, was a butterfly, yellow, still, watching. He didn't move. He didn't need to. Instead, he smiled, bowed slightly, and turned back toward the house. There was nothing left to say, nothing to prove, only this. that the whisper still remained, that the dream, once a fleeting vision, had woven itself into the rhythm of his life, into the way he spoke, into the way he waited for dawn, into the way he gave thanks for the smallest things, the taste of a ripe plum, the sound of rain on the roof, the way a child looked up at him with awe. Elijah would age, and seasons would turn, and someday he would leave this world behind. But the whisper would remain, in the soil beneath the cedar, in the stories told by firelight, in the quiet moments when someone closed their eyes and let their soul float free. Because home isn't always where you begin. Sometimes it's what finds you in the middle of a storm, in the corner of a nap, in a moment of unexpected stillness. Sometimes home is a dollhouse beneath a sofa, or an island ruled with gentleness, or the arms of your family wrapping you in sleep. But always, home is where your heart says, "Here." And the whisper will be there to greet you. Software sacred, true. And so, beneath the old cedar tree, as the final raindrops touched the leaves, a farmer awoke, no longer the man he was before. Aiden had never left his village, but the dream, it carried him across kingdoms that had no name, across time, across the quiet corners of his own heart. And he came back, not with titles, not with power, but with a memory of a place that had loved him like he was the one it had waited for all along. A dream that left a mark, like the scent of lychee on silk sleeves, like the sound of waves against a tiny boat made of bark. Because sometimes, a dream is not an illusion. Sometimes, it's a place the soul once wandered, and the miracle is, it still lives within us, with every gust of wind, every stillness in the night. Thank you for listening. If this story touched you, give yourself a moment of peace tonight. And remember, home is where your heart returns, even through lifetimes of dreaming.